purposefully made to see you. I'll be the indecisive bird like the snake. I'll break myself into
Hello. Oh, I just went to grab my chair because it just seemed the natural thing to do, but I was going to start standing up. Well, I have started standing up and just see how it feels. It does feel a bit strange. I'll just stick with it for a little while. The camera angle is kind of wrong. But anyway, as I've said many times before, this is all experimental. And it did occur to me that if I was going to host an event called How to Lose Your Cool in Public, I should start by setting the right example. Yes. So welcome everyone, all 11 of you. Thank you for the likes. And here we are one more time, and one more time I have a very liminal kind of foundation for this. I have some dreams I wanted to share. For one, it definitely does feel strange standing up. I don't think I'm going to last very long in this position. I suppose because part of it is that I do this looking at myself, which is really terribly narcissistic. But because I can't see anyone else, what else am I going to look at? And yeah, it feels unnatural to look down, and doesn't really feel right to be just staring at the curtain on the window. Alright, well I think I'll sit down then. I'll consider that experiment now over, and I'll work on it for next time. The main thing is the freedom of movement from standing up, I think. I mean, the main advantage, but that's also a bit inhibiting. Okay, glad you think it's better. Was it the angle, do you think, or was it just the weirdness of it? So, as I say, I was going to share some dreams today. So I've had a series of dreams over this week. It's also been an interesting week, as they say in China. Yeah, a kind of looming angle, says Floyd. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that was a bit off-putting. I don't want to be looming, even though I have felt life has been looming over me this week a little bit. I've had some stressful experiences online with feedback about last week's event, most of which I deleted from the YouTube channel, so you can't refer to it. Also at my blog. And although I'm not going to jump to any conclusions in terms of cause and effect, I would say I've also been a bit under the weather for the last few days. And I mean, I have been recovering from a sickness, but I don't think it's related to that. I would say that I have had a resubmersion in old despair, old and familiar despair. The song was Hazelwood Motel is the name, and good luck finding this person online. He has many names and does almost nothing in terms of self-publicity, and is almost impossible to find. Otherwise, I would have had him on the podcast by now, assuming he wanted to do it. But it's the same person who does the song for the outro of the Liminalist every week. Anyway, I'm not going to get into my moods and all that. I just brought that up as a bit of context, and because I'm sure it's a common language that we all speak, the language of despair, whether we like it or not. We have learnt it by heart. I shouldn't speak for anyone or everyone, but I think I know a few of you by now well enough to know that you do know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I think that the dream I had last night has something to do with it also, so I'll get to that. But first of all, I'm going to describe a dream I had earlier this week, because I think it pertains to the subject matter of today's event, about cool, what it means to be cool and what it means to lose one's cool, and why I'm recommending the latter. So in the dream, I was on a bus, and I was surrounded by human demons, or demonic humans, take your pick, and they were trying to eat my soul, or my flesh. I'm not sure which. It was a dream, so am I in my body or am I in my soul when I'm dreaming, or both or neither? And I was not really enjoying the prospect of having my body soul eaten by demons, bite by bite. It was a very painful experience. And I started thinking, if only I was Jesus Christ, I'd be able to handle all these demons. Why can't I be Jesus? It wasn't with that kind of energy. I'm just acting it up a bit now. And then something happened, which I'm not sure what, because dreams being dreams, it's always hard to unpack them. But it was as if I got my wish and I became Jesus. So there wasn't a big there wasn't a big hallelujah or anything like that. But I I was given the insight anyway that now I'm Jesus. It turned out that it was infinitely worse, because now I was so completely open and vulnerable that I would not only experience my own pain, but everybody else's too. And so I was going to have to experience all the pain and suffering and anguish caused by demons, real or metaphorical or metaphysical, throughout all of time. And so although my wish had been granted, it turned out that it was more than I had bargained for, and it was the opposite of the solution I'd been hoping for, which was an escape from this terrible situation and the granting of complete invulnerability. It was rather that I was made completely and utterly vulnerable by becoming Jesus. So I think that in ways much more subtle and obviously mundane, I have been experiencing a little bit of that via the interactions this week with some angry readers or listeners who seem to have been offended by my promoting of Devoshana. And in very brief, because I want to get to the other dream before I go off into analysis or any of that sort. I have to be careful what you wish for. One of the things I had to become more aware of while interacting with hostile voices at the blog or YouTube was that, here were people who, it seemed to me, did not like my show of vulnerability, consciously or unconsciously, and were threatened by it in some way or triggered by it in the vernacular. And so they came in with an offensive sort of reaction, and probably what was behind that offensive reaction was a defensive one, as in the best defense is an offense. And I imagine maybe largely because of my own past history of demonstrating my ability to tear people's arguments to shreds, as somebody put it at the blog. There might have been a preemptive sort of attack mode from those people because they might have expected to be challenged or undermined by my rigorous intellect. Let's say I'm interpreting a lot here, but the reason I am is that I realized for myself at least that it was really essential that I stay as vulnerable as I had already made myself, even while trying to respond to these criticisms. That I was able to resist or overcome the urge or the instinct to become more defended while under attack, because in a certain sense that was what they wanted, the demons in my dream, and to some extent these hostile voices on the internet. And the challenge that presented to me was, well, grace under fire, or surrender in the trenches kind of challenge. And so, and what it comes down to, I believe, is not picking up the sword of the mind, of the defensive ego, no matter how badly I might feel that I need it. And of course, all this relates to cool and how we try and create a cool persona to navigate the world, and how hard it is to let go of that defended, cool, dark persona. And I've certainly done that and demonstrated the ways in which I've done that with being the one and all of that. So to some degree, I see what's happening as one more layer of my constructed identity coming apart, and if I can cooperate with that process, but it does incur a corresponding counter reaction from myself and from the world that doesn't want that constructed identity to come undone. And it is indeed very difficult to resist the urge to grab onto the armor and start reassembling it when the first experience I have of disassembling it is to get wounded, which is essentially what I feel happened this week. Not to get out my tiny violin or anything of that sort. I hope you know that's not the point I'm making here. Anyway, I'm going to recount the next dream now, which was the night before last. And in the dream, well, there were various parts to it, so I'll just try and condense the essentials, it down to essentials, the ingredients, so that you have a simple fast food but nutritious meal of it. I think the first component was to do with recognizing that I had been depressed and that I had concealed my depression from my partner, and that because of that I wasn't really present in my life. I wasn't really living. Now it's a bit circular because depression, to my mind, does have to do with the closing of the heart. Anyway, so is it a cause or is it an effect? But I think the key point there was the concealment of it, that I was feeling somehow cut off from my feelings and my life force and my heart, and yet I was trying to conceal it and indeed hide in various activities and pretenses that would make it less painful. And that seemed to be the real problem there, particularly in an intimate relationship, that the unhappiness was less of a problem than the pretending. The second part of the dream had to do with the realization, well, this is the central part. I realized that the reality that I was in, that I was living in, this life that I'm living, is or was a complete illusion or construction or fabrication, and that I was trapped within it, and that it was almost impossible to get free of this trap that I was in, this illusory reality, this matrix realm. But that what made it even worse was that I wasn't even doing half of what I might be doing to get free of it, again because of this succumbing to despair and to pretending and just getting along and just trying to enjoy as much as possible the kind of mundane distractions of this pseudo reality, meant that I was just remaining ensconced in it because I wasn't able or willing to really experience the despair and the anguish of recognizing the unreality of my situation. And I also realized, or was shown or given the insight, that as bad as it was for all of us, it was only getting worse, because although this was an ancient metaphysical kind of prison that we had found ourselves in, the advances in technology were such that the encroachment of this illusory realm was extending further and further into the deepest recesses of our spiritual or our soul natures, and that this was represented in the dream by the use of technology to send language, or actually just single words, into the silent realms of the soul, where language thus far had not reached. And that because these deeper recesses of our being were in touch with or aware of our more shallow, superficial, or simulacra selves, they did recognize language, even if they never referred to it. And so even a single word that was cast via this advanced technology into the silent recesses of the soul would be sufficient to disrupt the pure signal of silence within the soul, and so imprison even that aspect of our being, and so on, like it was going deeper and deeper into the our essential natures. So the prison was just becoming tighter and more inescapable. And what this led to in the dream was an expression of anguish on my part, from the deepest part of me, and I was calling out to the other dimensions, the deeper dimensions of silence, with my own prayer, which wasn't languified, which was simply an appeal to my soul or to God to have pity on me, this cartoon self that I'd become, even though I knew that in the eyes of God it didn't even exist, to at least recognize the anguish and have mercy and set me free. And the last part of the dream, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, was when I was talking to my wife in the dream about my experience, what I'd seen, and I expressed the realization that if we did not get free while alive, incarnate, if we didn't become fully enlightened, fully embodied while alive, we would, when we died, it would be as if literally we went to hell, because we would, as disembodied spirits, be caught in limbo on the earth realm and have to witness as the earth and humanity went deeper and deeper into this technological soul trap, eventually leading perhaps to the collapse of the ecosystem and all the other things that would maybe someday bring an end to the insidious matrix dominion over the soul. But nonetheless, it felt as though this was an indefinite period that would just be stuck disembodied, watching helplessly while things went further and further to hell. Now, I share all this not to make you feel gloomy or despairing, which is exactly how I felt waking from that dream, during it and after it. I suppose before it too, because it must have been sparked by something. I felt lost. I felt like there is no hope for me. As Tracy says, it reflects her own deepest fears. Yes, I feel that I'm not alone in this, which is why I chose to share it. Initially, I thought about sharing it with a kind of thrust of doom and gloom of, look, we've got to shape up, we've got to get our act together, because look how bad it is and how bad it can get. It's going to get even worse. And that was the part of me that was triggered by the dream. In the dream, while talking to my wife, because I was very angry with her in the dream that she was not going to take it seriously enough to do anything about it. I knew that. And then in waking, there was a similar sort of response. From my wife, which was to make fun of it and me, the dream. And lo and behold, when I sent the dream to Dave, also with an expression of despair, he also made fun of it, not in a malicious way. My wife didn't either, in a playful way. And he liked it, actually, and said I should write a script based on it. So it was an odd response from Dave, because unlike that of my wife, it seemed to be validating the content of the dream as meaningful, while at the same time making light of it. And this, I think, is very much the key, not in the Whitley Strieber sense, maybe not in the St. Peter sense either, but just, in the general metaphorical sense. This is why I put the opening line as, well, the opening line, but I mean the thing I put in the text, trying to do our own salvation equals guaranteed damnation, because this dream and my experience afterwards kind of allowed me, even compelled me, to go back to what I had already learned, and very much I mapped in Prisoner of Infinity, the danger of esoteric knowledge being primarily, in this context, but I think in general also, that it has the quality of compelling us to feel the need to do something about it. That there's something about esoteric knowledge which compels action. It seems to be configured in a way that is, this, now do something about it. And this is the trap. This is the trap of the demons that want me to try and become powerful to defend them. The trap of whatever aspect it is of us, or something outside of us that does feed us little by little knowledge about our true predicament, but in such a way that we will be deranged by it, because it is truly deranging to the mind. There's simply no way for the mind to handle the truth of our situation. But fortunately, the mind doesn't have to handle it. And in fact, the mind is very much the problem. The mind is its own place and will make a hell of a heaven. And that's where we're trapped. And well, this does seem to be, well, I think it presents its own solution, because although letting go of the mind isn't easy, it's like a sticky plaster that just keeps going from one finger to the next. And it's also like a Chinese finger trap, that if we try and use the mind to get free of the mind, then the mind has us even deeper levels. So it's incredibly, well, what can I say? I don't know how to finish that sentence. It's maddening. It's both impossible and so easy that we just don't see how to do it. That's what makes it seem impossible, because it doesn't require any kind of doing, and all we know with the mind to do is doing. And well, I don't know if there's anything that comes after that, and I've talked for 25 minutes already. I'd like to get it to the main subject today, which is about cool and where that comes from and why it's relevant to me now, this particular time, and why it's become front and center. So as a subject, my eyes twitching. I think I'm losing my cool. Which, or one of the ways I see what's happening with me is that, yes, I'm losing my cool, and part of losing my cool, I mean, with certain audiences, certain people, but I mean, so I'm not going to let them define my reality, but it also is meaningful to me, in a certain sense, that I'm willing to let down this persona or this image more than I've done before. That a big part of being cool, if you think about it, as adolescents and teenagers, is being dark and edgy. The cool persona, what is that? It's unruffled, it's undisturbed, unperturbed, it's nonchalant, it's blasé, it's not necessarily confident, because a lot of us can't fake confidence, but we can definitely fake indifference. And obviously cool means unemotional, so not feeling stuff deeply, or at least not showing our feelings deeply. Now, this also goes hand in hand with cynicism. Like, the cool persona is a cynical persona. They've seen it all, done it all, not going to buy into your bullshit, man. You can't pull one over on me kind of persona. I think it's more and more the case, but even in my time, there was definitely an element of that. And of course, it goes hand in hand, because it's like in love, if you don't show your feelings, then you won't get hurt. You maintain control in a relationship. Well, the same as if you don't get excited or passionate about anything, you can't be exposed as having been a sucker of having bad taste. And I suppose part of this is that as adolescents and teenagers, or even before that, we're constantly adopting values that actually don't fit, and so we're constantly having to change them. So we're becoming more and more jaded about whether anything means anything. And so you could see how it leads into a cynical, nihilistic persona. And how imprisoning that can be. Excuse the dead air, but I just became aware that I was just sitting here talking to an image of myself on a screen. There's all those people out there that are watching, and it's a very unnatural kind of setup, only possible in our current age. Very relatively new setup. And certainly an example of how we can communicate in the world and have an experience of being in the world in which we can maintain our cool. We can be untouchable and invulnerable. Like, I don't even have to acknowledge your existence out there, really. I mean, I keep looking at the numbers, I can look over the comments, I don't have to look at any of that. I can just look at myself and pretend that it's just me here. So I'm in a powerful position in that regard, even though I'm voluntarily exposing myself to the world, which some people erroneously think of as brave, because it isn't. I mean, it can be. There are ways in which one can expose oneself to the world that certainly are brave. As I said to Gib recently, me talking about all the dark stuff in my life and even the trauma and so on, and even my own, pathologies, isn't particularly brave for me. It's compulsive. It's been a necessary thing. But me talking about what I love most in this world, what I really value, in this case currently Dave Oshana, I don't mean to put him at the top of a hierarchy or anything like that, but I mean in terms of that's something that is I have a very intimate feeling of goodness around. So to talk about that did require courage. I mean, I was aware of a risk, and then I had an experience in which I was like, oh fuck, I didn't realize it was that risky, and now this really tested my mettle, so to speak. And where was I going? I was going two ways with this, and now I'm not sure which one to get back to. So the cool and the dark thing is that for me, one of the ways that I've been able to maintain my cool and my credibility and to feel safe is to focus on dark stuff. And that is changing. And that is uncomfortable and difficult for me, because I feel like I know what I'm doing when I'm talking about deconstructing organized malevolence in the world. And I also feel, well, what's to lose, really? Besides my life and my home and all of these things, like there's theoretical dangers of doing that. But I'm talking about a much deeper danger of losing my cool, losing what it is that protects me on a moment-to-moment basis that makes me feel safe. Now, that isn't necessarily a real danger, and certainly not as real as the idea of some repercussions from organized malevolence if I step on the wrong toes and they decide to do more than erase my Wikipedia page. But all of that is just abstract. As I said, I can't factor in the risk there in order to decide how to proceed. I just have to proceed intuitively and instinctively, and if I see kickback, then I respond and react and change strategies and so on and so forth. But that's very different from actually being attacked online by people that are my audience. That's obviously much closer to home, and that's an immediate thing. Like that can happen at any time, at any moment. I mean, right now, somebody can post a comment that says, something hurtful, and boom, suddenly I'm made vulnerable. And this is something is going on more and more in the world via the technology. Like the technology, as I say, allows us to interact in a way that is prophylactic, armored, defended, and one can be as snarky as one likes and then just disappear, and one can do drive-bys and so on and so forth. And well, it's just something that came clear to me in terms of responses this way. I don't want to keep focusing on the negative. I mean, it's it's that thing again, but there are ways in which I want to communicate, and there are ways in which I want to reach people, and that extends to there are kinds of people that I want to reach, people who are willing to interact in a certain way and to go deeper and to be more vulnerable and more intimate and more interactive. And that does require a kind of commitment. Now, there's at least two kinds of commitment. One is just commitment to understanding what I'm trying to do here by reading the books and following along and really kind of having a sense of what I'm doing, and not just coming along for a YouTube event and then having a reaction that's easy and quick. And so that's the first kind of commitment. The second kind of commitment was much more important, and that's the commitment that I myself am trying to find within myself, which is a commitment to getting to the truth of ourselves. And that doesn't happen until we start referring to something that isn't the mind, and start being willing to interact with something that isn't the mind, rather than leading with the mind, always leading with the mind. This is what I felt I was able to observe via the comments and whatnot. I had to start to have a sense of when somebody was leading with their mind and just responding with their mind, and how that itself was lifeless and somehow toxic in and of itself. That's the simulacra, that's the replicant, that's the false self. And it can't be vulnerable, because it is itself a defense against vulnerability. So there isn't anything to say to that. There isn't anything to say with that part of us, and there isn't anything to say to that part of someone else. Okay, I'm going to catch up with comments, because I feel like I haven't really been interacting as much as I would like to. Hellblazer said words. The word bed looks like a bed, so there's that. Let's play it. Heather said, resisting the urge to do something with esoteric knowledge echoes resisting the urge to combat the haters. Yeah. Most people learn to save themselves by artificially limiting the content of consciousness. That's interesting. Kate Mitchell says, the wish to stay completely open to the situation can enable one to surf the wave of any impression, including despair. The body must hold the greater part of attention to stay in front. And Hellblazer 23 says, as a quote, look at your body, a painted puppet, a poor toy of jointed parts, ready to collapse, a diseased and suffering thing with a head full of false imaginings. I don't know who that's a quote from, but it seems like it's a quote. Okay, I'm going to look at my notes. Okay. So one of the points I wanted to get to was, and it's back to this cool thing, the created persona, is that, I mean, I write about this in Seen and Not Seen, like how I cobble together a persona at a conscious level. And of course, this begins at an unconscious level, pre-verbal even. This begins in very early childhood. But I think we can still, I mean, we have to start with what we know. And there's many layers to the constructed identity, many layers of cool. And it was possible for me to, I mean, one has to start with the outer layers, because that's where one is at. And so it was possible for me, looking back over my previous writings and looking over my past and my relationship / obsession with movies, to see the ways in which I had consciously constructed an outer layer of the false identity, or the cool self. And it was literally a emulation of cool in the form of Clint Eastwood, the leading embodiment of cool in the 70s and 80s at least. Not really anymore. And it occurred to me that, and of course later it was Neo from the One, when I was old enough to really have known better, but I was still doing it in a more satirical wink wink nudge nudge way. And because the Matrix is a kind of revelation of a method sort of movie, in that it's not so much showing the way reality is or has been socially you know reconfigured to appear to be or whatever, but actually showing what the process of watching a movie is. In that when we watch a movie, we enter into a surrogate reality by creating an avatar, or having an avatar created for us in terms of the Matrix, that by the act of suspension of disbelief, we actually end up believing is ourselves and have these surrogate experiences as if they were happening to us. And if we die in the Matrix, the body dies, because a body without a mind can't survive. Well, of course, that last part doesn't literally happen. But what does seem to happen is that when we're watching a movie, we have the experience, like the brain, the mirror neurons in the brain are reacting and signaling to the body as if the body was having the experience that it's watching somebody else have on the screen, and even a simulation of it, not even a real violence, but simulated violence. But again, the brain doesn't necessarily know the difference between simulated and real violence, and it doesn't necessarily distinguish between something that someone else is doing or is happening to them and what's happening to the body, at least in the realm of mirror neurons. And this is, I think, must be central to the appeal of movies, that we really can have a vicarious experience of living by watching them. And as I wrote in The Secret Life of Movies, that there's a correlation between schizophrenia and movie watching. Now, schizophrenia isn't just a split identity, or it isn't specifically that. It's a cutoff between one's sense of self and one's sense of reality. One doesn't really feel that one is in reality per se. One is seeing reality as if it's separate from oneself, or vice versa. And which, of course, is like watching a movie. And although generally being schizophrenic is very stressful, that is presumably largely partly because even though one feels alienated, depersonalized, and disassociated from reality, one knows to some degree that one isn't, if only because reality keeps acting upon one, encroaching upon one and hurting one, threatening to hurt one, but potentially really hurting one, committing one to a lunatic asylum, or whatever else it may be. And the movie is the opposite of that. The movie experience is the opposite of that. One can have the experience of being in reality while one knows that one actually isn't, and that nothing on the screen can really hurt one. And I talked about this previously on my seen and not seen event. This also corresponds with the way in which, apparently, as consciousness, or as biological organisms, we learn. I mean, this is how thought maybe is generated, and certainly the imagination is employed by the mind identity as it developed to imagine hypothetical scenarios in order to get a sense of what might play out before deciding whether to embark on that experience or not, right? So we create these avatar selves, and then we put them in situations to see what will happen. Well, I mean, that's something that's trained into us by, or even programmed into us biologically to do that, perhaps. And that's what watching a movie is as well. We create an avatar, or again, the avatar is created for us. Clint Eastwood, Keanu Reeves, Matthew McConaughey, whoever it is, and then we suspend our disbelief. We identify with the movie star, and then we experience all that they experience, and then we get a sense: is it for me, or is it not for me? If we enjoy the movie, then we've been indoctrinated with those set of behaviors, and we're much more likely to emulate and embody them in life. Hence the power of movies to act as propaganda, even when not designed that way intentionally. The culture will just keep spawning objects that propagate and proliferate its own ideology to spread the virus. And so all of this is about cool, is about how and why we create a cool persona again, a way of being in the world that is safe, protected, invulnerable, detached, removed from harm. It's an avatar self, the cool self that I'm referring to. It doesn't always have to be cool in the cliche ways, but that's the easiest and most obvious example of that kind of subterfuge. And well, the reason that I came up with this subject was because of my experiences talking about Devashana and talking about my experiences with Devashana, and how there were quite a few knee-jerk responses that were just, what are you doing? Why are you taking on another guru? What if he's full of shit? You're going back in the past, you're repeating your habits, you've got father hang-ups, and so on. All of which were very odd if you consider that if people were actually interested in what I'm doing, they only have to wait another week and they can check out Dave, and then they could actually tell me, I don't think Dave is any good and here's why, and I'd be very open to that. And that's partly why I want this to happen, is I want to get people's feedback about Dave. I'm very open even to critical feedback about Dave. I'm not open to people just drive-by shooting with knee-jerk reactions saying things that are completely devoid of any heart or soul or insight, that obviously I've thought of 1,000 times before and have been wrestling with, and so on and so forth. It's not like I don't know it's a risky endeavor to give someone the power to influence my behavior in that way, or to defer to somebody's greater wisdom, and so on and so forth. Of course it's risky. But the cool, defended avatar identity doesn't say it's risky, just says it's bullshit, because I'm the shit. And there's no way I'm ever going to look up to anyone else, because that's all shit. And we know that's all shit because we've seen the movies and we've done the paranoid awareness deconstruction, and we've proved that it's all a lie. Well, no, we haven't. Of course not. We've certainly deconstructed several layers of deception, but we haven't got to the final layer. So how can we say that underneath the final layer there isn't a pristine, essential self, nature, that is true and pure and good? And that's the whole purpose and reason to embark upon this deconstruction in the first place. Because if it was all shit, what's the difference? You might as well, just like in my nightmare, just keep on pretending and just enjoy the distractions. Pick the shit that you know, of the 51 flavors of shit, pick your favorite flavor. And that's not what I'm about. But the whole impetus of this quest has always been to get to the truth, with the understanding, with the absolute felt sense, belief, faith that the truth in its inherent goodness will set us free. So, but yeah, back to the loss of cool thing. Well, a central part of the illusion of cool, the illusion that cool provides, is illusory autonomy, independence, self-sufficiency. Hey, I'm cool, man. I don't need any of this shit. You know, I can pick and choose. I make my own choices. This is just the narcissistic nihilism of our times. Doesn't allow for the recognition of a higher authority unless you go into the AA. And it certainly doesn't allow for a human embodiment of virtue, even though that's kind of the only hope we have, is to become that. And if we aspire to becoming that, well, surely we'll be on the lookout to see if anyone else has made progress on that path, and is exemplifying the thing that we're hoping to become. And yes, maybe we won't find it. That's true. Of course, that's possible. We are living in this terribly fallen dimension of being. But would we recognize them if we did find them? And if so, how? And how long would it take? And what would it look like? And how useful would that be? It seems to me it is incredibly useful to find somebody who is relatively free of the mind. And in fact, in a certain sense, and this is a limited sense because it's only referring to if we're going to look outward of us, outward from ourselves for some sort of ray of light, that may be the only hope that there is. Now, I say it's a limited sense because in the end, nothing outside of ourselves can save us or rescue us. Finally, I don't believe. We have to take the final step towards God, and then only God can retrieve our souls. But at the same time, none of this is going to happen without reference to what's outside of us. And well, I'm less sure that I can trust my own dreams, actually, than that I can trust certain things outside of myself, which would include other people at certain times and moments. This isn't a blanket surrender to a guru or anything like that. But it is a blanket trust in the immanence as well as the transcendence of the divine, and that there are pockets and corners of this fallen realm in which the divine shines through. There are rays of light, and my whole life has been about trying to locate that light and to follow it, like being deep down in a cave and labyrinths of caves, and just trying to sense where there was more light and where there was less, and just keep moving towards it until I could see an actual ray of light, and then I know that the opening is that way. I don't know how far it is and if I still have the strength to get there, but I know it is that way, and I will keep going that way. And maybe I still won't make it through my own failure, through my own lack of nerve or commitment. Yes, true, but at least I know the way, I believe I do. And that makes commitment a lot easier. And this does raise a certain conundrum, because I guess commitment isn't effort. I think, in my dream, the nightmare, and I've had recurring nightmares of this kind, the only thing that I'm able to do in that situation of recognizing the trap that I'm in and the inescapability of the trap, the identity trap, is fully allow myself to see and feel and experience the anguish of being so situated, and yet to communicate that anguish, or to express that anguish, or to experience it in a way that is directed towards the light that I cannot actually see. Faith that if my cry is heartfelt enough, if my prayer is true enough, it will be answered. That's all I've got in those nightmare situations. And so that doesn't require effort, but it does require a willingness to be absolutely vulnerable to the situation, to not try and hide from it, and to allow myself to experience the powerlessness of it. So now this doesn't happen much in life, and certainly doesn't happen very much with my relationships with Dave or Shana. Well, I shouldn't say certainly, because that would probably be the place it would most happen besides my marriage. A willingness to experience powerlessness and humility to surrender to the situation and to my inability to understand it or control it or direct it, and just trust that somehow something will save me from myself, from my own inability, my own confusion and despair. I certainly have been through that in my marriage, I will say that, and it seems to have been worth it, although it's not over yet, still very hard. And I would say I've been through that with David Shana, also particularly on this last retreat. And the question of trust came up on that last retreat. And I said to Dave and to the group, there's no way I'm ever going to 100% trust you, Dave. So if that's a prerequisite for working together, then it's not going to work. And what I meant then was my mind. Mentally, there was no way for me to 100% trust Dave or anyone else. But what I realized with time, I mean, a very short time, like a day or two, was that it was the wrong configuration. I didn't need to 100% trust Dave as a human being. I needed to trust him just the way that I trust my wife or somebody that I know and love. That there has to be the trust there that was just natural part of knowing and loving someone. But beyond that, it was just about trusting Dave's abilities to deliver. And so far I've seen so far there's only been one occasion in which Dave didn't deliver, and I responded accordingly. I said, okay, so you're not delivering now, so I'm off, I'm on my own. And so we parted ways, and it was a good experience for me. And coming back was easy. A couple of years later, there was no hard feelings. It was just like, okay, so you're going this way now, and you're not really addressing my needs here now, or even acknowledging them so long. There wasn't rancor or recrimination. There was, you can imagine me, I was outspoken in my criticisms and so on, and I was hurt, but it wasn't like a big angry deal. And to me, that was as invaluable a part as all the rest of my experiences with Dave, is the recognition that there's no codependency going on there. That whatever I'm exploring and experiencing and getting closer to by associating with Dave, it's not dependent on Dave. And the moment that I'm getting further from it by sticking with Dave, then I move away from Dave. Then I keep going, and then I end up Dave's there again. Dave is a parallel rider. He's parallel, but he's also way ahead. I recognize that, but weirdly, there's some trans-spatial dimension thing going on there, so that's the paradox, isn't it? Parallel and way ahead. But anyway, I don't want to talk particularly much about Dave, but this is a point of reference in terms of the overall subject about autonomy, the false autonomy of cool, and the true autonomy that allows for a certain degree of deference and even dependence on another for us to find our way. We are interdependent. We are dependent on each other. So to pretend that we're not, and to balk at the possibility that we might really be much more lost than we know. We might really need more help than we realize. And we might be depending on any number of things that are really not beneficial to us, whether it's Netflix, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's alcohol, whether it's, casual sex, whether it's porn, whether it's dysfunctional family relationships, and so on. Like, we're dependent on so many things, and that includes people. But they don't force us to see our dependence or our lack of autonomy. They come under the illusory rubric of, it's my choice, maybe not family, but and discovering true autonomy seems to me is about what was I going to say there? Recognizing that the choices that we think we've made throughout our lives were not choices. They were reactions to the advertising. Okay, I'll just catch up on the comments and then I'll think about rounding up. I think we are aware on some level that the self is temporary, says Angela. Kate Mitchell, what is the source of integrity of being, faith in consciousness remaining still to truly digest the dream? Contemplation of suffering in one's body, giving it all the time it needs to heal. Taking a neutral, objective, open attention may share the appearance of cool, but defines a needed inner posture to take in the conscious seeing we desperately need to see. Cool is imitation, true seeing. And then his Manification says, hello from York, not far from you. Well, the York I know is, of course, from Yorkshire, in which case not far from where I was born, but it's very far from where I am now. Okay, I'll just check. Oh, I know what the thing was. I think I sort of got to it. Was Lewis's question? Having someone assist us with our salvation, especially if they're the wrong person, can also result in damnation. In which case, it's extremely risky either way. Is there a third option? I wonder. I think I've probably covered that. Yeah, I think I just covered that just now, really. The third option. So, so I want to recount a third dream because that was last night, and I think it might offer the solution in a way. And well, it was this morning actually. It was this morning. I'd been woken up, and so I wasn't sure if I get back to sleep. Quickly, I put on MP3 player and I started listening to recording of my last conversation with Gib from Thursday, and I fell asleep very quickly. But what happened this time when I fell asleep was I was still able to hear the recording. And I still have to follow along with my conversation from Gib. And I know because when I woke up from the dream, I remembered every word of it. And not only that, I could remember it, when it had come in the dream. So I'd been dreaming, and in the dream I was, I think I'd left one bed, and I'd gone out, and I think it was around dawn. It was still stars in the sky, I think. And I went to this sort of undeveloped plot of land over a road, and I lay down under the sky in the mud, not mud, but dirt, earth. And I was very, very comfortable, even though I was getting dirt all over me. There was a real feeling of well-being being there in the body and in the dirt, in the earth. And all this time I was listening to the audio, not in the dream, in my bed, in that body. So I was in two places at the same time. And the audio recording wasn't really informing the dream. It was as if I was just listening to it in the dream while the other stuff was going on. And it went on for a little while. And when I looked, it had only been 7 minutes of the recording, but it felt like more time in the dream, certainly, even though weirdly the timing would have been exactly corresponding. I mean, must have been real time in the dream because I was hearing the audio in the dream. And in the dream, my cat Tuco was there. I think I was coming and going across the road with him, but at a certain point I lost him, and then I found him, and he was wounded, and he had the fur on his back was all torn off, but although it was bloody, the skin underneath wasn't bloody or flesh or viscera. It was just like shaved skin, so it wasn't too serious a wound. It didn't seem like, but the skin had all been pulled off, so he definitely needed some care and attention and stitch up job. And I picked him up and I was carrying him, and he seemed to be okay even though he was wounded. So it wasn't a nightmare, but it was disturbing. It didn't seem like a positive dream per se, or that part of the content of the dream wasn't particularly positive at all. But overall, the dream, I suppose it's vulnerability, maybe, that's happened with Tuco, signifying vulnerability. But overall, the dream felt very rich and nourishing, and contrary to the other dreams, particularly the second one I recounted, it gave me a feeling of well-being and in and after the dream. And part of that, I think, was that it was very much as though I discovered, or I was using the bridge, was aware of the bridge between this reality that my previous dream had made clear is not real, and another reality which was, I suppose. Certainly, I mean, everything seemed good in that dream despite Tuco's wound. Anyway, I don't want to overinterpret it or analyze it, but my sense is that the thing that I'd been that had seemed so far beyond my reach in the previous nightmare, was there just at the wink of an eye, or the nod of a head. For like I fell asleep and just went into another state of being. And I wasn't aware of being in a different state of consciousness, but clearly I was, because I was in two places at the same time. And being in two places at the same time suggests that we're not only imprisoned here, we're also free somewhere else, under the stars, in the dirt. And I think that one of the things that the nightmare was reminding me of is not that we're trapped in this fallen realm and all that stuff, because I don't ever really forget that. Although I suppose in some ways I do, because I live as if we weren't. But I don't think it was primarily about that. I think it was more about how a premature awareness of the nature of reality had actually maybe crippled me in certain ways, been too oppressive, and had driven me into all kinds of behaviors and activities that weren't healthy and certainly didn't lead to my freedom. And the well, I'm reluctant to put this into words, I suppose, but what is most important to me about my relationship with Deva Oshana is simply that from all I've been able to see in my 11 years associating with him, it is possible to be free. And not only is it possible, but it can happen at any time without any apparent effort or strategy or subterfuge or as a result of any kind of methodology. And as Dave calls it, the journey of zero distance. We're already there, but something is preventing us from recognizing where we are. And that something, as long as it comes between us and an experience of ourselves and of reality, is as like everything. It's the equivalent to everything. It's a whole labyrinth of organized malevolence. But very central to how that labyrinth keeps us trapped in it is the spell it casts that causes us to believe that it's real and that it's all that there is. So, after I had the nightmare, my first impulse was, oh my God, I got to shape up. I got to get, stop slacking and stop giving in to bad habits and bad patterns and start living like there's no tomorrow and so on and so forth. But I realized that I'd done that 1,000 times before. And it never really makes any difference. So, what does that leave? Radical acceptance. That's what I said to Lewis. That was my answer to Lewis's question, and he wanted me to explain it more. What does radical acceptance mean? Well, it means how much are we able and willing to see of the truth and still have faith in the goodness of existence. And, well, apparently it's very, very hard for a lot of people, because I've spent many years mapping the depth and scope of the dark side of existence. And, well, it's pretty popular nowadays. I mean, it's pretty widespread, this perspective that everything's shit, and it goes deep and high and low into every dimension of culture and society and so on. And yet, the sun still shines on us. We're still being nourished. So what that indicates then is that the capacity of the human mind, or the configuration of the human mind, can't deal with reality. Okay, fine, good to know. Guess what has to go? Well, guess what has to take a back seat? The body can deal with reality. The heart can deal with reality. The soul can deal with reality. Consciousness can deal with reality. Language cannot. Good and evil. The tree is the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. Language. So radical acceptance, radical vulnerability, radical surrender. I suppose surrender is always radical, isn't it? It is a radical term in itself. Maybe radical forgiveness. That's not a word I use often. It's very disorienting. It's always going to be disorientating. I don't really know where I am currently in terms of whatever I'm doing. I mean, there are things I know what I'm doing, of course. I'm pretty clear. My association with David Shano, how that's going, that seems pretty clear, surprisingly, considering how much unknown there is there, and the thrift store, and so on. There are areas where it's fairly clear, but there are other areas where it isn't. And one of them is my online activity and output, or my position really on the world, because I see how easily fixed and coagulated knowledge, perceptions, insights become into a worldview. And then it's just another, we've used a nail to drive out a nail, but the new nail got stuck in there. So the post-Jan Irvin point of view that everything is been co-opted and it's all a big conspiracy and there's nothing good out there, well, it doesn't leave any room for the sunlight to get in, or the wind, or the air, or water, like the things of nature, the things that are good, can get everywhere, and they get everywhere. It only seems as though we're developing the power and the technology to trump nature. It's clearly an illusion, even if you don't believe in peak oil. But it's a very profound one, and again, to the mind, if we knew the scope and the reach of organized malevolence, we would believe that it was unstoppable, omnipotent, all reaching into every corner of existence. But that's because the mind itself has been configured by the very culture that is imprisoning us, and that's how it's imprisoning us. So I guess I have a challenge ahead, which is how to lose my cool without losing the plot. How to put down my primary tools of communication, language, writing, talking, to put down the aspect of them that's been weaponized and still be coherent. Floyd said, once you recognize the evil, the good is much harder to see. I think it's much harder to believe in. I don't know if it's harder to see. He also said, I pray that there's balance and just as much good as evil exists because I've been over-focused on the evil these last few years. Yeah, well, ditto. This is make it the last few decades. And yet, I never stopped believing in good. I haven't been able to pay lip service to good because I haven't been able to believe in the words that culture society's given us to describe the good, nor have I been able to believe in the examples of good that I've discovered. Like good movies, well, a good movie is maybe just an especially bad movie in this sort of you know, well, the sort of paranoid awake framework, nothing good comes out of Babylon. So we have to be able to see the subtler cues. And this is why I feel that there is a metaphoric or a aspect to my attempting to introduce people to Devachan and vice versa, because that's an example of something that seems like it can't really be good. I mean, to many people, obviously not to everyone, but because it has the accoutrements, the packaging of the spiritual marketplace, and is almost indistinguishable to the passing observer from 1,000 other gurus out there who, one way or another, are inauthentic. So, and on top of that, the very nature of the experiences, or the experience singular, the experience beyond the mind that I feel that David Shana has access to in his own life, or lives in his life, and that he has helped me to have access to. This is by nature is an experience that can't be languified, that can't be captured by language. So that in itself is a tailor-made challenge for me at this stage. And even for that reason alone, I think it's worth doing, because I don't know where else to go currently with language, where to take it when I've mapped to my own satisfaction the trap, the prison that I was born into. And I believe that those three books, Seen and Not Seen, Prisoner of Infinity, The Vice of Kings, together, if read right, if read with discernment and for the nuance and the subtext and all the clues in there, is like a manual for your own cultural deconditioning. Potentially, they certainly map my own process up to this point, and this point is the threshold. Because if you see that all of your points of reference up until this point are compromised, have been given to you by the enemy, what do you do then? It's not enough just to say, well, I won't refer to any of those points of reference, because then you're adrift. It'd be like me trying to give up Netflix and Bombay Mix and all my other little comforts, thinking that, yes, this time I'll become a true formless warrior and I'll get free of the fallen realm of the flyers and the eagle won't eat me and I will live forever. Bullshit. It's not enough to see the nature of reality that imprisons us, or that aspect of reality, and to think, oh, well, I can figure my way out of it, or I can will my way out of it. No. When you see the nature of it, you see that will and mind and intellect and calculation isn't going to ever see us out of it. So all those points of reference, you say, well, they're imprisoning me. They were culturally, they incepted in me by a malevolent culture. And then what? Well, then where's the point of reference that's true? Where do I begin? How do I begin with a point of reference that's true? And where else but with other human beings? And where else, if we were lucky enough, with another human being that may actually have found the way to freedom? They may not, but it's not something I'm going to ignore, is it? This has all been the quest for that. Yeah, for the father, the brother, and so on. But yes, for truth and freedom embodied in this realm, not some abstract thing or something in scripture or doctrine. Here, now, in the flesh. Hello, David. That's our magic, the ability to transmute negative things into positive ones. Regen evidence everything is evil. Suffering can be used to connect with others where other forms such as culture lack. Sharing one's pain is radical intimacy. Right, well, I'll just check my email, but I didn't receive sufficient sign-ups for the after me. So unless there's a few more right now, then there won't be one. So if you're interested, you could email me right now, jason@protonmail.com. That's Jason with a U. Say, yes, I want to be an after me. Or you could just put it in the comments. And in the meantime, I'll carry on a bit longer with this in case there are any questions or requests or anything of that sort. Could also just put another song on. Just catching up on the comment, or seeing if I've missed any of the comments, see if there are any questions. Okay, no, I don't think I missed any. If you feel that I did, just retype it. Is that Jason Butler from the podcast? Be interesting if it was, because I was thinking about that, Jason, just a few days ago. Is there an app needed for the after me? I think if you've not used Zoom, I think it does when you join. I think it does automatically download some sort of app. It's very easy and automatic, though. Thanks, Heather. So also say, of course, for those who don't know, the Dave Oshana meet is the free event is on April 6th, so that's actually a week today. It's at, I think, at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, so a couple of hours before this meet. It usually is, and because of that, I won't be doing this event because I'll be going to Dave's, and I hope I'll see some of you there. It's entirely free, and he's limited to 100 slots, only 100, and he said that it's 75% booked already. Of course, some of those people may not show up because it's a free event, so they won't probably feel as committed as they would. But anyway, I encourage people to participate. It's going to be very interesting one way or another. And I definitely want to invite feedback afterwards. Also, if people do go and they want to talk to me about their experience, I'm going to create a space for that. I'll no doubt address it in the next one of these events. I'm not sure when that's going to be. I might do one on Friday, as in the day before the Dave Oshana free event, or perhaps more likely on the Sunday after. But that would be particularly if people wanted me to talk about it, or if they were interested, or so on. But I definitely would like to leave a space open for something that's kind of crossovery in that regard, because I think it's it's going to be very, very interesting, as I've already said, for me to see Dave in that context and to see how others see Dave. Because there's probably going to be a lot of people that have come via me. I'm not sure how many. I could guess maybe 30 of you or something like that. And that will certainly change the nature of the transmission. So Nahal, I guess is reference to Castaneda, says an after meet sounds interesting. So but you have to email me if you want an after me. That's Floyd and Nahal Jason with the U at protonmail.com. And because what I would do if I did have an after me, it's sunny out here and I just want to be relaxed and chill out. So I would actually go to the hammock, set up my laptop there and do it there. So I would say I want at least 5 other people and 1 donation, let's say, and 1 person has offered to donate if they're listening. So I'll close off here because there haven't been any questions, and I'll just check my email. I'm going to write it in here just in case people are getting confused. And I'll check my email over the next 10 minutes, and if there's enough interest, I will send you the link and we can reconvene there. All right then. I'm going.
She comes out of nowhere and leaves while I sleep. I haven't left this room in nearly 2 weeks. Little specks of dust that sparkle in the sun make it hard to breathe. It's like breathing in someone. I can hear my heart beat with my ear against the wall. There's no telling which way these walls might fall. Perfectly outrageous claims about my aim challenge my existence. Tell me I'm to blame.